modern day countries of France, Italy, Germany, and England. The exception to all of what I'm going to tell you in Western Europe is always going to be what? Spain. Spain is Muslim. Right. So, everything we're going to say about Europe, about Western Europe, the exception to the rule is going to be Spain. Spanish Iberia. Okay? So, what are we getting ready to do? You know it. Alright, G.persia. Geography. Western Europe. Alright, politically. Decentralized. There are no major kingdoms. It's small local regions as a rule of thumb. Again, what had happened was what? Barbarian groups came in and destroyed the power of Western Europe, which was what? The Romans. And then what do? Different barbarian groups form their own communities and their own small kingdoms. Do these kingdoms traditionally get along during this time? No. A common theme for this entire period in Western Europe is warfare. Widespread warfare amongst one another. As a rule of thumb, you don't see powerful political figures. You see feudalism. What is feudalism? It is a political and economic system that develops in Western Europe. Okay? In the feudalism, there's a hierarchy. Okay? That hierarchy is you have a king. This person is very, very weak. So, for example, you have a guy who calls himself the King of England. In actuality, his power is very, very weak because of this. No, that's much different. Alright, underneath the king, you have wealthy, landowning, nobility. Some places they're called barons, some places they're called dukes, some places are just called lords. Alright? Now, how many nobles, so these nobles in theory pledge their allegiance to a king. The king is powerful, the king, let me start with, they pledge their loyalty to the king. What does the king give them in return for loyalty? Power.
Land.
Land. Land. What do the nobles have to supply in return?
Money.
Soldiers. Underneath the nobility, you have upper class warriors. That's what a knight is, an upper class warrior. How come you had to be upper class to be a knight? Because what the stuff you have to be a knight, it ain't cheap, right? It's expensive. You didn't see common people become knights. What is the code of honor that knights live by? Chivalry.
We did this in grade.
Okay. But understand, this is a method of control. What's the lowest class of people? Now, let's get to this essential thing. So, what's the nobility give knights? Their knights in return for their loyalty.
Supplies and
They
stuff.
give them land. So they take some of the land the king gave them, divide it amongst their knights. Here's the problem. This is why these guys are so powerful and this guy's so weak. Who is their allegiance to?
The wealthy land owning nobilities.
To the nobility who's hired them. Right. The lowest class of people are serfs. In name, they are not slaves. In actuality, they're pretty much slaves. Whoever's land a serf is born onto, they're committed to stay on for the rest of their life. They owe their noble 30% of the crops they grow, 3 months of free labor on the noble's land itself. When you harvested your wheat, can you take it anywhere to sell?
No.
No. When you want to grind into flour, can you take it anywhere to grind into flour? No, you have to use your noble's mill. And guess what he's going to do when you want to use his mill? Charge you 20% for that. So you give your noble 30% of your grain right off the top. 20% of the grain that you're trying to turn into flour, you got to give them as well. And you got to give them anywhere between a month and 3 months of free labor. That doesn't sound like freedom to me. 90% of the population of Europe are serfs. Okay? And they're controlled and dominated by these two classes of people, knights and nobility. One of the frequent causes of warfare is that I might be a noble who's got an allegiance to a king. Jake might be a noble who has an allegiance to the same king. But when we're not serving together in the king's army, do I have the right to go bonsai on him and try to take his stuff? No. Yeah. So even though we're both part of the quote-unquote the same country, it doesn't mean I can't take his stuff from him. And the king doesn't not care as long as when he calls you to join his army, you respond. So like my knights and your knights might have been fighting to the death a month ago, and now the king has called them into service, and you're going to work side by side with them. It's an odd system, to say the least. Alright, economically, they are not involved in widespread trade routes at all. None of them. So what happens to them during this time period?
Nothing.
They fall behind. Western Europe is one of the most primitive regions on Earth during this time period because they are not exposed to all the innovations that are taking place globally. They fall way, way, way behind. Economically, socially, intellectually, culturally. In fact, it's so bad. How do we refer to this time period in Western Europe? The Dark Ages. The Dark Ages. 1,000 years where Western Europe is living in darkness. One exception in this. Two exceptions in this, excuse me. Spanish Iberia and Northern Italy. Northern Italy is the exception to all these rules. Northern Italy is urban, and they are involved in long-distance trade. If you read Anna Byzantium, who was the group of merchants from? Venetian in northern Italy that the Byzantine emperor was negotiating with. There are two windows to the rest of the world from Western Europe. Spain and northern Italy. The rest of Europe, living in complete darkness. The biggest city in Western Europe this time period is probably Paris. It has 30,000 people. By contrast, Baghdad will have 6 million. Okay? And again, what goes hand in hand with urban areas? Trade. It doesn't have trade. Right. Religion. The one cultural uniter of all of Western Europe is by 600, most of those barbarian tribes have adopted Christianity. Roman Catholicism, to be specific. And who's the head of the Roman Catholic Church in Western Europe? The Pope. And what's the seat of the Pope's power? Where is he out of? Rome. Okay? And again, do Western European Christians get along with Eastern European Christians?
No.
Not a lick. Okay, we talked about the Great Schism. Here's a list of important innovative. Well, we got to do society first, don't we? The biggest social thing is feudalism. Again, they don't really own slaves, but at the same time, they're not right. Is it patriarchal?
Wait, 9% of their,
Not, roughly 9% of the population starts. Is it heavily patriarchal? Yes. Here's a list of great female leaders of Western Europe during this time period. And
We're done.
innovations. Here's a list of great and important Western European innovations during this time. And right, they're falling way behind. Their art, we're not even going to talk about it. We're not going to talk about Western European art. It's nothing of great importance or relevance as far as what we need to talk about. There are two important things that happen in Western Europe. Actually, there's three important things I want you to know about as far as what happens in Western Europe. Number one, discovery of America by Vikings. 950-ish. We don't know exactly the year. You guys probably know this story. In the 10th century, a Viking group in Iceland goes to Greenland. The guy who launches this colony in Greenland, his name is Eric the Red. He goes back to Iceland and says, hey, this place is beautiful. It's awesome. Come with me. Let's go live in Greenland and start a colony there. Well, he called it Greenland because he wanted to make it sound like it was awesome. Greenland is a godforsaken frozen rock. And when people move from Iceland, which is a beautiful oasis in the world, to Greenland, they tried to live there for about 20 years. They got so fed up with him, they eventually stoned Eric the Red and went back to Iceland. They're like, you are a liar, liar, pants on fire. But then Eric the Red's son, Leif, launches a voyage of exploration. And sometime in the 950s, he discovers the Americas.
Wait, Eric left?
Leif, Eric's son.